You know that feeling when you check your bank account and there's something there? Not just enough to cover rent and groceries, but actual money sitting there doing nothing, just existing. And you feel this weird mix of pride and panic because part of you wants to celebrate and the other part is like, okay, but what if my car breaks down next week? Yeah, I've been there. Most of us have. We're told to save money our whole lives, save for emergencies, save for retirement, save for a rainy day. But nobody really explains what happens when you actually do it. Like, really do it. When you hit that first major milestone that feels substantial. My name is Emmy, and I spend way too much time thinking about money, financial psychology, and specifically this weird phenomenon where people's lives seem to completely transform after hitting certain financial thresholds, even though the number itself isn't magical. There's something deeply fascinating about watching someone go from paycheck to paycheck anxiety to this calm, measured confidence. And it usually happens around the same point. Their first $100,000 in savings. Now, I know what you're thinking. Emmy, $100,000? I can barely save $1,000. And honestly, that's exactly why we need to talk about this. Because the journey to 100K isn't really about the number. It's about the psychological transformation that happens along the way. And understanding that transformation is what actually gets you there. Here's the thing nobody tells you. The first 100K is borderline impossible to save, like genuinely absurdly difficult. But after that, the second 100K happens faster, the third even faster. And by the time you hit $500,000 or beyond, the money almost seems to accumulate on its own. It's not magic, and it's definitely not because rich people work harder than everyone else. It's because of specific psychological shifts and mathematical realities that kick in once you cross certain thresholds. And that's what I want to unpack today. Not just how to save money. You can get that advice anywhere. But why your entire relationship with money fundamentally changes after you save your first 100K. And how understanding this can completely reshape your financial trajectory, even if you're starting from zero right now. So let's start with the brutal honesty. Saving your first $100,000 is genuinely hard. It's not hard in the motivational poster way where someone says anything worth doing is hard and you feel inspired. It's hard in the soul-crushing, why am I even bothering way? Think about it. If you're saving $500 a month, which is already more than most people manage, it takes you 16 to 17 years to hit 100K. 16 years. That's assuming nothing goes wrong. No medical emergencies, no job losses, no, my transmission just died and I need $3,000 immediately moments. In reality, for most people, it takes closer to 20 years or more. But here's where it gets interesting, and this is what Charlie Munger used to talk about all the time before he passed. He'd say the first $100,000 is I'm gonna quote him here, a bitch to save. Just straight up, no sugarcoating. And he was a billionaire saying this, by the way. He understood something fundamental about wealth building that most people miss entirely. The mathematical reality is this. When you have $1,000 saved and it earns 8% in the stock market for a year, you make $80. $80. That's basically nothing. That doesn't even cover a nice dinner. It definitely doesn't feel like your money is working for you. It feels like you're doing all the work and your savings are just sitting there mocking you. But when you have $100,000 and it earns that same 8%, you make $8,000. $8,000. That's meaningful money. That's multiple mortgage payments. That's a small emergency completely covered. That's the kind of return that actually starts to matter in your daily life. And this is where people's psychology shifts in ways they don't always consciously recognize. Your money starts feeling like a partner instead of a burden. It's working alongside you now, not just sitting there passively. I remember talking to a friend of mine, let's call her Sarah, who hit 100K in her savings and investment accounts last year. And she described this moment that I think perfectly captures what I'm talking about. She said, I was at the grocery store and I needed to buy some expensive ingredients for a dinner party. Nothing crazy, but like good olive oil, fresh seafood, decent wine, probably $200 total. And for the first time in my adult life, I didn't feel that little spike of anxiety before checking out. I wasn't mentally calculating whether this would mess up my budget for the week. I just bought the groceries. Now, Sarah's not rich. She's a teacher. She drives a 10-year-old Honda. She lives in a modest apartment. But she had crossed this threshold where everyday financial decisions stopped being sources of stress. And that psychological shift, that's worth more than people realize. Because here's what happens when you're living without financial cushion. Every single decision carries weight. Your car makes a weird noise and you ignore it, hoping it goes away because you can't afford to deal with it. You turn down social invitations because you've already hit your entertainment budget for the month. You stay in a job you hate because the fear of a 2-week gap in paychecks is genuinely terrifying. This is what psychologists call scarcity mindset, and it's exhausting. It literally drains your mental bandwidth. There are studies showing that financial stress reduces cognitive function by about 13 IQ points. 13. That's the difference between average intelligence and borderline impairment, just from worrying about money. But when you have a solid financial foundation, when you've got that 100K working for you, suddenly your brain has space to think about other things. Better career moves, creative projects, long-term planning. You're not in constant survival mode anymore. Okay, so everyone talks about compound interest. Albert Einstein allegedly called it the 8th wonder of the world. Though honestly, that quote is probably made up. But the concept is real and it's legitimately powerful. Except, it doesn't really feel powerful until you have enough money for it to work on. Let me break this down in a way that actually makes sense. If you invest $5,000 a year for 10 years and earn 8% annually, you'll have about $78,000. You put in $50,000, the market gave you $28,000. Nice, but not life-changing. But if you keep going for 30 years, you'll have about $566,000. You put in $150,000, but you earned $416,000 from compound growth. That's 2/3 of your total wealth coming from investment returns, not your contributions. And this is where the first 100K acts as this critical launching pad. Because once you have a substantial base, the compound interest starts generating real, tangible money. Money that accelerates your progress in ways that feel almost unfair. There's this concept in finance called critical mass, borrowed from physics. It's the point where a chain reaction becomes self-sustaining. In wealth building, that first 100K is essentially your critical mass. Before it, you're pushing a boulder uphill. After it, the boulder starts rolling on its own, and your job shifts from pushing to steering. I've seen this play out over and over. Someone spends 10 years scraping together their first 50K, then hits 100K 2 years later, then 200K 2 years after that. It's not because they suddenly started earning twice as much or saving twice as hard. It's because the math fundamentally changed in their favor. Here's something people don't talk about enough. Financial security doesn't just change what you buy, it changes what you're willing to risk professionally. And those risks often lead to significantly better outcomes. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, your career options are limited by fear. You take the sure thing. You stay in the comfortable, stable job, even if it's slowly killing your soul or keeping you underpaid. You don't negotiate aggressively because you can't afford to have the offer pulled. You don't start that side business because the startup costs feel insurmountable. But when you've got 100K in the bank, the entire calculation changes. You can take that job that pays less initially but has way more upside. You can negotiate from a position of strength because you're not desperate. You can walk away from toxic work environments without spiraling into panic. You can invest in yourself. Courses, certifications, networking events, starting a business, because you have the cushion to absorb short-term costs for long-term gains. I know a guy who worked in corporate accounting for 12 years, hated it, absolutely dreaded Monday mornings, but he had a mortgage, 2 kids, and no savings, so he stayed. Then, over about 6 years, he aggressively saved and invested, hit 120K in liquid assets, and immediately gave his notice. Started a financial consulting business, took a 40% pay cut the first year, but within 3 years, he was making double his corporate salary and actually enjoyed his work. Could he have done that without the savings? Technically, maybe, but realistically, no way. The mental and financial cushion gave him permission to bet on himself. This is one of those invisible privileges of having money that people who've always had it don't even recognize. The freedom to take calculated risks is worth more than the money itself sometimes. Okay, this is going to sound weird, but one of the most underrated benefits of hitting financial milestones is what it does to your relationships. Romantic, friendships, family, all of it. Money is the number one thing couples fight about. Not sex, not kids, not in-laws, money. And it makes sense, right? When you're stressed about finances, everything feels higher stakes. Your partner wants to grab takeout and you're thinking, that's $40 we don't have. They want to book a weekend trip and you're calculating whether your emergency fund can handle it. But when you have a solid financial foundation, so many of those friction points just evaporate. You can have conversations about money without them turning into fights about values or security or worthiness. You can be generous without feeling resentful. You can make decisions based on what you want, not just what you can barely afford. And honestly, it makes you a better friend too. You can show up for people. Someone's going through a hard time and you can take them to dinner without checking your account balance first. Your friend's starting a business and you can invest a few $1,000s to help them out. You're not constantly in a position of having to say no to things because of money. There's also this subtle confidence shift that happens. When you're not constantly worried about money, you stop bringing that anxiety into every social situation. You're more present, more relaxed, more yourself. People pick up on that energy even if they don't know the specific reason behind it. Let's talk about the thing nobody wants to think about, but absolutely needs to. Life is chaotic and unpredictable, and having money is basically insurance against that chaos completely derailing you. Your car breaks down, your kid needs emergency dental work, you lose your job, your roof starts leaking, your dog eats something stupid and needs surgery. These aren't hypotheticals, these are things that happen to literally everyone at some point. When you're broke, any one of these things can trigger a cascading disaster. You put the car repair on a credit card at 22% interest. You can't afford the dental work, so the problem gets worse and more expensive. You panic about the job loss and take the first offer even if it's terrible. Each crisis makes your financial situation worse, which makes you more vulnerable to the next crisis. But when you've got a 100K cushion, these things are annoying, not catastrophic. You're irritated that your car repair costs $1,500, but it doesn't destroy your month. You handle the dental work immediately before it becomes a bigger problem. You can be strategic about job hunting instead of desperate. The roof repair is a pain, but it doesn't require you to go into debt. This is what financial advisors mean when they talk about an emergency fund. But I think the term emergency fund undersells it. It's not just about emergencies, it's about having the flexibility to handle normal life without every unexpected expense feeling like a crisis. And the psychological relief of that? Massive. You sleep better. You're less anxious. You can focus on actually solving problems instead of just panicking about them. The investment opportunities that suddenly appear. Here's something kind of wild. When you have money, you get access to better ways to make money. It's one of those things that makes wealth inequality kind of self-perpetuating, but it's also just reality. When you're broke, your investment options are basically limited to whatever your employer's 401k offers. Maybe a basic savings account that pays 0.01% interest. And if you're really on top of things, a Robinhood account where you're buying fractional shares. But when you have substantial capital, like $100K more, suddenly you can do things like actually diversify properly across different asset classes. Invest in real estate, either directly or through better REITs. Access lower fee investment vehicles that have minimum buy-ins. Take advantage of tax loss harvesting strategies. Invest in yourself or a business with actual capital behind it. Buy quality assets when the market crashes instead of panic selling. And probably most importantly, you can think long-term. You're not forced to chase high-risk, high-reward plays because you're desperate to turn $1,000 into $10,000 fast. You can make boring, smart, stable investment decisions because you have time for compound interest to work. I've watched too many people with small amounts of money make terrible investment decisions because they felt like they needed to hit a home run. They put their $2,000 into some crypto that promises 1,000% returns, or they day trade options, or they dump everything into a single stock because they heard about it on a podcast. And sometimes they get lucky, but usually they just lose money or waste years spinning their wheels. When you have a substantial base, you can afford to be patient and strategic. And patience and strategy, tend to win in the long run. This one's a bit more subtle, but if you have kids, or plan to, Hitting financial milestones completely changes what you can pass on to them. And I don't just mean money, though that matters too. When you grow up in a household where money is constantly stressful, you internalize that stress. You learn that money is scary, that there's never enough, that wanting nice things is somehow morally wrong or unrealistic. Even if your parents try to hide the financial anxiety, kids pick up on it. But when you've built financial security, your kids grow up with a completely different model. They see that money is a tool, not a source of fear. They see you making thoughtful decisions instead of panicked ones. They see you being generous and taking calculated risks and planning for the future. Plus, practically speaking, you can actually help them. You can pay for college without them drowning in debt. You can help with a down payment on their first house. You can bail them out if they make mistakes without it destroying your own finances. You can invest in their education, their opportunities, their dreams. This is how wealth builds across generations. It's not just about leaving an inheritance, though that matters. It's about breaking cycles of financial stress and giving the next generation a running start instead of starting from zero, or worse, from negative. So here's the thing I've noticed that's hardest to explain, but maybe most important. When you hit real financial milestones, something shifts in how you carry yourself. It's not arrogance, or it shouldn't be, but it's this quiet confidence that changes how you interact with the world. You negotiate better because you're not desperate. You make decisions from abundance instead of scarcity. You're willing to walk away from bad deals, bad relationships, bad situations because you have options. You stop tolerating things that don't serve you because you're not trapped by financial necessity. People pick up on this, even subconsciously. Employers, clients, potential partners, they can sense when someone is operating from a position of strength versus desperation, and they respond accordingly. I'm not saying money solves everything or that rich people are better humans. They're absolutely not. But financial security does give you the breathing room to be more of who you actually are, rather than who you need to be to survive. Look, I get that if you're starting from zero or negative, if you're in debt, barely covering expenses, wondering how you'll ever save anything substantial, this whole conversation might feel discouraging. Like, great, Emmy, tell me more about how awesome life is with $100K when I can barely save $100. But here's the actual point. Understanding why the first 100K is transformative is what gives you the framework to get there. Because once you understand the psychological shifts, the mathematical realities, the opportunities that open up, you can start making decisions differently right now. You don't need 100K to start thinking like someone who has financial security. You can start negotiating better, taking small, calculated risks, building skills that increase your earning potential, avoiding the scarcity mindset traps that keep people stuck, creating systems that automate saving so it actually happens. The first 100K is hard, genuinely, brutally hard. It requires discipline, sacrifice, patience, and honestly, some luck. Being in the right job market, avoiding major disasters, having some baseline of health and opportunity. Not everyone has the same shot at it, and that's worth acknowledging. But if you can get there, if you can push through the years of it feeling pointless, of watching your savings grow painfully slowly, of questioning whether it's worth it, something genuinely transformative happens. Not just in your bank account, but in your psychology, your opportunities, your relationships, your entire relationship with the future. The money itself isn't magical, but what it represents, security, options, breathing room, the ability to think long-term, that changes everything. It's the difference between surviving and actually building something, between being at the mercy of circumstances and having some actual agency in your life. So if you're on that journey right now, wherever you are, $500 saved, $5,000, $50,000, keep going. The mountain gets easier to climb. The compound interest starts actually mattering. The psychological weight lifts. Your first 100K really does explode into opportunities you can't fully see from where you're standing right now. And that's not hype or motivation speak. It's just math and psychology working in your favor. Finally, for maybe the first time in your financial life. Trust the process. Stay consistent. The transformation is real, and it's waiting for you on the other side.